The proximity alarm screamed across the bridge of the UES Meridian, their piercing wail cutting through the usual hum of hyperspace engines. Captain Vex Rourke's weathered hands froze over his coffee cup, the bitter liquid still steaming as crimson warning lights bathed the command deck in hellish illumination. "Contact bearing 027, Mark 45, Lieutenant Kaya Varson called out, her voice tight with disbelief. "Mass signature, Captain. It's massive. Multiple contacts, closing fast." Rourke set down his cup with deliberate calm, though his pulse hammered against his throat. 23 years commanding vessels in the Outer Rim had taught him that panic was a luxury no captain could afford. "How many ships, Varson?" "Sir, I'm reading." "Jesus Christ." Her fingers danced across the holographic display, recalibrating sensors that refused to believe their own readings. 137 distinct vessels. Formation suggests a battle fleet. Identification? Rourke moved to the tactical station, his boots echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the bridge crew. That's the problem." "Sir." Chief Petty Officer Marcus Delacroix looked up from his station, his dark face pale with shock. "The lead vessel is broadcasting UES transponder codes." "But Captain." He swallowed hard. The ship identifying itself as the Valiant Ember was declared lost with all hands 7 years ago. The name hit the bridge like a physical blow. Every officer present had heard the stories, the legends that had grown around humanity's most infamous ghost ship. The Valiant Ember had vanished during the Battle of Kepler's Gate, taking with it Admiral Lysander Korath and the remnants of the Third Colonial Fleet. The official report listed them as casualties of war, heroes who died fighting the hegemony's relentless advance. "Sir, they're hailing us," Communications Officer Nira Okafor announced, her usually steady voice cracking slightly. On screen, the main display flickered to life, revealing a figure that made several bridge officers audibly gasp. Admiral Lysander. Korath stood before them, but this was not the man they remembered from recruitment posters and ceremonial broadcasts. His once pristine uniform was now matte black, adorned with insignia that belonged to no known human military organization. Burned scars traced jagged paths down the left side of his face, and his eyes held a cold fire that seemed to pierce through the transmission itself. "Captain Rourke." Korath's voice carried the same commanding authority it always had, but underneath lay something darker, something that made Rourke's skin crawl. "It's been a long time since we've encountered a UES vessel. I trust you're well, Admiral Korath." Rourke managed, his mind racing. "Sir, you were listed as killed in action 7 years ago. Where have you been?" Korath's scarred lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Dead? No, Captain. We've been very much alive. We've been learning, growing, evolving beyond the constraints of Earth's short-sighted command structure." "Sir, I don't understand." "Of course you don't." Korath's image leaned forward, and Rourke could see the bridge behind him a twisted amalgamation of human technology and something else, something organic and alien. "Tell me, Captain, are you still taking orders from the same cowards who abandoned us at Kepler's Gate? Still following the same failed strategies that cost us half the colonial fleet?" Rourke felt his crew's eyes on him, waiting for his response. The implications of Korath's words hung in the air like poison gas. "Admiral, with respect, I follow the chain of command. My orders come from Fleet Command, just as yours once did." "Fleet Command." Korath spat the words like a curse. "The same Fleet Command that left us to die while they retreated to safer sectors. The same command structure that treats human colonies like acceptable losses in their grand strategic calculations." The transmission quality flickered, and for a moment, Rourke could swear he saw movement in the shadows behind Korath's shapes that didn't look entirely human. "Admiral, what happened to you out there?" Korath's expression hardened. "We found allies, Captain. Allies who appreciate humanity's true potential, not the sanitized version that Earth prefers to showcase. We learned that sometimes, to save humanity, you have to transcend it." "Sir, I need to report your return to..." "You'll report nothing." The temperature in Korath's voice dropped to absolute zero. "Because you're going to help us complete our mission, one way or another." Rourke's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "What mission?" "The same mission we've had for 7 years, Captain. The complete and total annihilation of the hegemony. No prisoners, no mercy, no quarter given." Korath's scarred face filled the screen. "Earth's way has failed. Now they'll see what humanity can accomplish when it stops playing by civilized rules." The transmission cut, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Rourke stared at the blank screen, his mind reeling with questions that had no good answers. Outside the viewport, 137 ships waited in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the scars of countless battles and modifications that hurt to look at directly. Whatever had happened to Lysander Korath and his fleet in those 7 missing years, one thing was certain: they hadn't come home to rejoin the fight, they'd come home to finish it. The Meridian's communications array crackled to life 18 minutes after Korath's transmission ended, flooding the bridge with overlapping voices as distress signals poured in from across the sector. Captain Rourke listened to the chaos with growing dread, each report painting a picture of systematic devastation. Hegemony Station Tau 7 is gone, sir, Lieutenant Varson reported, her face pale as she processed the incoming data streams. Complete destruction. No survivors detected. Mining Consortium Alpha Prime reports they're under attack. Communications Officer Okafor added, switching between frequencies with practiced efficiency. They're describing ships that match the Ember fleet configuration. Rourke closed his eyes, processing the implications. In less than an hour, Korath's fleet has struck 3 separate hegemony installations with surgical precision, but these weren't military targets, they were civilian operations. Mining platforms and research stations with minimal defensive capabilities. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command, Okafor announced. Put it through. Admiral Helena Voss materialized on the main screen, her iron-gray hair pulled back in regulation style, her expression carved from granite. Behind her, the Strategic Command Center buzzed with activity as staffers coordinated responses to the crisis. Captain Rourke, report your status immediately. We're tracking massive energy signatures in your sector, and we've lost contact with multiple hegemony installations. Admiral, I've made contact with the source. It's Lysander Korath. MAM, the Valiant Ember has returned. Voss's composure cracked for just a moment, a flicker of something that might have been fear crossing her features. That's impossible. Korath died at Kepler's gate. No, ma'am, he didn't. He's alive, and he's commanding a fleet of 137 vessels. They've been attacking hegemony positions across the sector. Attacking hegemony positions? Voss leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Captain, are you telling me that a rogue human fleet is conducting unauthorized military operations in our theater? Yes, ma'am. And Admiral Rourke hesitated, knowing his next words would change everything. I don't think they're entirely human anymore. The silence that followed stretched for several heartbeats before Voss spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of command decisions that would affect millions of lives. Captain Rourke, you are hereby ordered to intercept and neutralize the rogue fleet by any means necessary. The Meridian will rendezvous with Task Force Prometheus in 6 hours. Admiral Korath is to be considered a hostile combatant and treated accordingly. Ma'am, with respect, we're talking about Lysander Korath. He's a hero of the colonial wars, a legend. He's a traitor. Captain, Voss's words cut through Rourke's objections like a blade. Whatever he was 7 years ago is irrelevant, right? Now, he's a clear and present danger to the stability of human space. Your orders stand. The transmission ended, leaving Rourke staring at the blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew processed the implications of what they'd just heard. They were being ordered to fire on fellow humans, to treat one of the colonial fleet's greatest heroes as an enemy combatant. Helm, set course for the Prometheus. Rendezvous point, Rourke ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. Ah, sir, came the response from Ensign Torres at the navigation station. As the Meridian came about, shifting from its patrol route to an intercept course, the tactical display updated with new intelligence. The Ember fleet had split into 3 separate formations, each one targeting different sectors of hegemony space with methodical precision. Sir, Chief Delacroix called out from his station, we're getting reports from the outer colonies. The attacks aren't random, they're hitting specific targets, supply depots, communication relays, anything that supports hegemony military operations. Korath's conducting a systematic campaign. Rourke realized, studying the tactical display with professional admiration despite himself. He's not just lashing out, he's dismantling their infrastructure piece by piece. Captain, Lieutenant Varson interrupted, her voice tight with urgency. We're receiving a broadcast transmission. It's being sent on all military frequencies, encrypted with colonial fleet protocols. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life. revealing Admiral Cora standing on what appeared to be the bridge of the Valiant Ember. But the space around him had changed since their last communication. The organic growths were more pronounced now, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to his presence. Officers and crew of the United Earth Fleet, Korath began, his voice carrying the same commanding authority that had once inspired hundreds of thousands of colonial troops. For 7 years, you have fought the hegemony with one hand tied behind your backs, constrained by the moral weakness of leaders who prioritize political expediency over victory. Behind him, movement in the shadows resolved into figures that made Rourke's blood run cold. They had once been human, but their forms had been altered, enhanced with biotechnology that pulsed with alien rhythms. I offer you a choice, Korath continued. Join us and help complete humanity's true destiny. We have the power to end this war definitively, to ensure that no human world will ever again fall to alien conquest, or stand in our way and be swept aside with the rest of the obsolete command structure that has failed our species for too long. The transmission shifted, showing glimpses of the Ember fleet in action. Rourke watched in fascination and horror as ships that looked like twisted amalgamations of human engineering and alien biotechnology tore through hegemony defenses. With ruthless efficiency, energy weapons that pulse with organic rhythms cut through shields like they weren't there, while boarding pods that looked more grown than built delivered assault teams that moved with inhuman coordination. You have 48 hours to make your decision, Korath announced as the display returned to his scarred face. After that, anyone standing between us and our mission will be considered an obstacle to be removed. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Rourke looked around at his crew, seeing his own conflicted emotions reflected in their faces. They were being asked to choose between duty to Earth's command structure and loyalty to a hero who had become something monstrous in his quest for victory. Sir, Chief Delacroix spoke carefully. What are your orders? Rourke studied the tactical display, watching the red icons that represented Korath's fleet continue their methodical advance through hegemony space. Whatever the Valiant Ember had become, whatever alien influence had transformed it and its crew, one thing was undeniable. They were winning. But at what cost? We follow our orders, Chief. Set condition read throughout the ship. All hands to battle. Stations. As the Meridian raced toward its rendezvous with Task Force Prometheus, Rourke couldn't shake the feeling that they were sailing toward the end of everything. They thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. Task Force Prometheus assembled in the shadow of Kepler's Gate, the same nebula where the Valiant Ember had supposedly met its end 7 years earlier. Captain Rourke studied the tactical display as 23 ships of the line took formation around Admiral Voss's flagship, the mighty dreadnought Retribution. It was an impressive force by any standard, but against Korath's 100-plus vessels, the mathematics looked grim. All ships report ready for combat operations, Lieutenant Varson announced from her position at the communications console. Admiral Voss's image appeared on the main screen, her expression carved from granite as she addressed the assembled fleet. Commanders, gentlemen, we face an unprecedented situation. A rogue element from our own forces has apparently allied itself with unknown alien entities and is conducting unauthorized military operations against hegemony positions. Rourke watched the faces of his fellow captains on the secondary displays. Some showed confusion, others barely concealed anger. Captain Elena Vasquez of the Thunderchild looked particularly troubled. Admiral, Vasquez interjected, are we certain about the alien involvement? Korath was always known for unconventional tactics and modified equipment. Captain, you didn't see what I saw, Rourke replied before Voss could respond. Those ships, that technology is unlike anything in our databases, and the crew. He paused. Remembering the inhuman movements he glimpsed in the shadows. They've been changed how, demanded Captain Rex Morrison of the heavy cruiser Devastator. Before Rourke could answer, alarms began screaming across the task force. The tactical display erupted with new contacts as 37 ships materialized at the edge of sensor range, their forms barely recognizable as human vessels beneath layers of organic modification. Contact, multiple bogies, bearing 270. Mark 15, the fleet tactical coordinator announced. They're not running silent, they want us to see them coming. Rourke studied the enemy formation with professional interest. Korath had brought just enough ships to make this a fair fight, or perhaps to send a message. The Valiant Ember led the formation, his hull now completely transformed into something that looked more grown than built. With weapon ports that pulse like breathing organs, Admiral Korath is hailing the fleet. Communications Officer Okafor reported, "Put him through." Voss ordered. Korath appeared on screen, but his transformation had accelerated since their last encounter. Bioluminescent veins now traced patterns across his skin, and his eyes held an inhuman intelligence that seemed to process information at impossible speeds. "Helena," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made several officers wince, "I had hoped you would understand. I had hoped Earth's leadership would see the wisdom in evolution. Lysander, what have you done to yourself, to your crew?" Voss's composure cracked slightly, revealing the woman who had once served alongside Korath during the early colonial wars. "We became what humanity needs to become to survive," Korath replied. "The hegemony isn't our only enemy, Helena. There are things out there in the deep dark that would make the hegemony's worst atrocities look like children's games. We found allies who showed us the truth evolution isn't optional anymore. And the cost of this evolution?" Rourke interjected, unable to remain silent. Korath's transformed features shifted into something that might have been a smile. "The same cost evolution has always demanded, Captain. The weak are consumed so the strong may thrive. My crew volunteered for transcendence. They understood that individual humanity is a luxury we can no longer afford." The tactical display updated as sensor sweeps revealed the full extent of the Ember fleet's modifications. What had once been proud human vessels now bore organic weapon systems that defied classification, hull plating that rippled like living tissue, engines that pulsed with biological rhythms, and worst of all, energy signatures that suggested the ships themselves were alive. "Last chance. Helena," Korath announced. "Stand down your forces and join us, or be destroyed with the rest of the obsolete order." "I'm sorry, Lysander," Voss replied, her voice heavy with regret, "but I can't let you continue this madness. All ships, weapons free, engage at will." The battle erupted with devastating intensity. The Ember fleet's organic weapons proved horrifyingly effective, cutting through Task Force Prometheus's shields with focused streams of energy that seemed to adapt and evolve with each shot. The Meridian shuddered as a beam of writhing green fire struck her port flank, eating through armor plating like acid. "Damage report," Rourke shouted over the chaos. "Hull breach on deck 7. We're losing atmosphere," Chief Delacroix called. Back, his hands dancing across damage control displays dot around them. The battle raged with unprecedented ferocity. The Thunderchild exchanged broadsides with a modified destroyer that looked like a mechanical shark, its hull rippling with bioluminescent patterns. Captain Vasquez's ship landed several direct hits, but the enemy vessel's organic hull seemed to heal itself, closing wounds that should have been fatal. "Sir, the Devastator is in trouble," Lieutenant Varson announced. Rourke looked up to see Captain Morrison's heavy cruiser surrounded by 3 Ember vessels. Their coordinated attack displayed a level of tactical synchronization that no human fleet had ever achieved. It was as if the ships shared a collective consciousness, anticipating each other's movements with perfect precision. "All batteries, target the lead attacker," Rourke ordered. "Fire!" The Meridian's main guns spoke in unison, sending a concentrated barrage toward the nearest Ember ship. The weapon struck home, but instead of the expected explosions, the impact seemed to be absorbed into the vessel's organic hull. Moments later, that same energy was redirected back at them as a focused beam that nearly took off their starboard engine nacelle. "They're adapting to our weapons," Chief Delacroix reported with growing alarm. "Each hit makes them more resistant to the same type of attack." Across the battle space, similar scenes played out as Task Force Prometheus discovered that conventional tactics were useless against an enemy that learned and evolved in real time. The Devastator finally succumbed to the coordinated assault, her hull cracking open like an egg as organic boarding pods swarmed over her crippled form. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Devastator," Okafor announced, her voice tight with horror. "Put it through." Captain Morrison's face appeared on screen, but his expression was one of transcendent peace rather than the terror Rourke expected. Behind him, figures that had once been his crew moved with inhuman coordination, their forms already showing signs of organic modification. "Captain Rourke," Morrison said, his voice carrying the same harmonic undertones that had marked Korath's speech. "Join us. The fear you're feeling is just your primitive brain fighting against evolution. Let go of your humanity and embrace what we can become together." The transmission cut. leaving Rourke staring at the tactical display as the Devastators. Transponder changed from friendly blue to hostile red. 3 minutes later, the ship that had been humanity's finest heavy cruiser turned its guns on the Retribution, firing with the same adaptive efficiency as the rest of Korath's fleet. "Sir," Chief Delacroix said quietly, "we can't win this fight. Not conventionally." Rourke studied the tactical situation, watching as one by one his fellow captains fell to an enemy that turned their own strength against them. The Ember fleet wasn't just winning, they were converting their victories into additional assets, turning each captured ship into another weapon in their arsenal. "All ships, this is Admiral Voss," came the fleet-wide transmission. "Execute Omega Protocol." "Repeat, execute Omega Protocol." Rourke felt his blood turn to ice. Omega Protocol was the last resort, the option no commander ever wanted to use. It meant the complete destruction of any captured vessels, regardless of the human lives aboard. As he watched friendly icons begin disappearing from the tactical display in brilliant flashes of self-destructs, Rourke realized that this battle was about more than military victory or defeat. It was about the soul of humanity itself. The Retribution died screaming. Admiral Voss's flagship, pride of the colonial fleet, cracked apart under a concentrated barrage from 6 converted human vessels. But even as her hull split open like a flower of fire and metal, her final act was one of defying humanity. The activation of her self-destruct sequence took 2 of the attacking ships with her into oblivion. Captain Rourke watched from the Meridian's bridge as the explosion painted the nebula in brilliant white light, temporarily blinding sensors across the battle space. When the glare faded, only 7 ships remained of Task Force Prometheus's original 23, and they were surrounded. "Sir, we're being hailed," Communications Officer Okafor announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "Put it through, Admiral." Korath appeared on screen, but his transformation had accelerated dramatically during the battle. The left side of his face now bore organic ridges that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and his eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire ecosystems of alien thought. "Magnificent, wasn't she?" Korath said, gesturing toward the expanding debris field that had been the Retribution. Helena always did understand the value of decisive action. Even her death serves a purpose. It removes one more obstacle to humanity's evolution. "You're insane," Rourke spat, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Those were good people, good officers." "Good people following obsolete doctrines," Korath interrupted. "Tell me, Captain, what has your precious chain of command accomplished? 40 years of war with the hegemony, and what do you have to show for it? Stalemate, endless casualties, colonies burned while politicians debate acceptable losses." The tactical display updated as the Ember fleet tightened their formation. Around the surviving UES vessels, Rourke could see boarding pods launching from the organic ships, their forms writhing through space like living things. "We ended the stalemate. In 6 months," Korath continued, 6 months of real war, and the hegemony's military infrastructure is in ruins, their fleets scattered, their leaders hiding in bunkers, their civilian populations beginning to surrender rather than face extermination. "At what cost?" Rourke demanded. "You become monsters." "No," Korath replied, his voice carrying alien harmonics that made the bridge crew wince. "We become what we need to be, what humanity has always been beneath the veneer of civilization apex. Predators who take what they need and eliminate what stands in their way." The first boarding pod struck the Meridian's hull with a wet, organic impact that reverberated through the ship's superstructure. Emergency klaxons screamed as the pod began eating through the hull plating with acidic secretions. "All hands, repel boarders," Rourke ordered, drawing his sidearm, security teams to breach points. But even as his crew rushed to defensive positions, Rourke knew it was hopeless. The Ember boarding parties didn't follow human tactical doctrines. They moved through the ship's corridors like living nightmares, their modified forms allowing them to navigate zero-gravity environments with impossible grace. The bridge security feed showed glimpses of the assault teams as they carved their way toward the command center. What had once been colonial Marines now moved within human coordination, their bodies enhanced with organic armor that absorbed energy weapon impacts and redirected them as focused heat beams. Their weapons were even worse, living things that fired spores instead of bullets, organisms designed to infiltrate and convert rather than simply kill. "Sir, they've breached decks for through 7, Chief Delacroix reported, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Security teams are falling back, but His words were cut off as the turbolift doors opened with a soft hiss. The thing that emerged had once been human, but its form had been so extensively modified that only the general bipedal structure remained recognizable. Organic armor covered its torso, and its left arm had been replaced entirely with some kind of bioweapon that pulsed with internal light. Lieutenant Varson screamed and opened fire with her sidearm, but the energy bolts simply disappeared into the creature's chest, absorbed by armor that glowed brighter with each impact. The thing raised its bioweapon arm, and Rourke realized with crystal clarity that he was about to watch his communications officer die. The spore burst caught Varson's center mass, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then she began to convulse, her body temperature spiking as billions of microscopic organisms went to work rewriting her DNA from the inside out. Kaya, Rourke lunged toward her, but Chief Delacroix tackled him to the deck as more converted boarders flowed onto the bridge. "It's too late for her, sir," Delacroix whispered, his dark face pale with horror. "Look," Rourke looked up to see Varson's convulsions slowing, her expression shifting from agony to something approaching transcendence. The bioluminescent veins that now traced patterns across her skin pulsed in harmony with the boarder's own modifications. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying new harmonic undertones, "it doesn't hurt." The fear was unnecessary. "Join us." More of his crew were falling to the spore weapons, their agonized screams cutting through the bridge's atmosphere before fading into the same peaceful acceptance. Rourke watched his tactical officer, his chief engineer, his weapons specialist, all of them transformed in moments, from loyal humans into something else entirely. "Sir," Chief Delacroix whispered, pressing his sidearm into Rourke's hand, "there's only one way this ends. You know that." Rourke looked at the weapon, then at his transformed crew members, then at the organic boarders who waited with inhuman patience for his decision. On the main screen, Admiral Korath watched with eyes that held depths of alien intelligence. "The offer stands, Captain," Korath said. "Evolution or extinction. Choose." Rourke raised the sidearm, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. Around him, his converted crew members reached out with expressions of beatific understanding, offering him the same transcendence they had found. For a moment, he wavered. The war had been so long, the casualties so enormous. If Korath had found a way to end it, if evolution was truly the path to victory, then he remembered Admiral Voss's final act of defiance, the way she had chosen death over conversion. He thought of the millions of humans throughout the galaxy who were counting on their military to protect them, not transform them into something unrecognizable. "I choose humanity," Rourke said quietly. He pressed the weapon against his temple and pulled the trigger. The explosion that followed vaporized the Meridian's bridge and command crew, denying the Ember fleet another converted vessel. As the ship's automated systems detected the loss of command authority, they initiated the same Omega protocol that had claimed so many other vessels. Admiral Korath watched the expanding fireball with something approaching respect. "Primitives," he murmured, but there was admiration in his alien voice. "But brave primitives." 6 more flowers of light bloomed in the darkness as the remaining Task Force Prometheus vessels chose extinction over evolution. When the light faded, only the Ember fleet remained, their organic hull scarred but unbroken. The Battle of Kepler's Gate was over. Humanity had lost, but in their final moments, they had chosen to remain human. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler's Gate, Earth's orbital defense platforms registered the largest fleet movement in recorded history. Admiral Korath's force had grown from 137 vessels to over 300, each ship a nightmare fusion of human engineering and alien biotechnology. But they weren't alone. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures emerging from previously unexplored sectors. The true masters behind humanity's evolution were finally revealing themselves. The Confluence, as they called themselves, commanded bioships that dwarfed even the largest human dreadnoughts, their forms resembling massive jellyfish that pulsed with internal galaxies of light. Fleet Admiral Marcus Thorne stood in the strategic command center beneath Geneva, watching the tactical displays with grim fascination. The remaining colonial fleet had been recalled to Earth's solar system, creating the largest concentration of human military power in history. 412 vessels of various classes, supported by orbital weapon platforms, asteroid fortifications, and the planet's own offensive grid. It still might not be enough, sir, "We're receiving transmissions from the outer colonies," reported Commander Yuki Nakamura. Her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "New Singapore has gone dark." The last transmission showed the population walking into conversion centers voluntarily. Thorn closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. The psychological warfare was almost worse than the direct military attacks. Chorus forces weren't conquering human colonies, they were offering them transcendence, promising an end to the pain and uncertainty of mortal existence, and people were accepting. "What's the status of the Mars defense grid?" Thorn asked. "Fully operational, sir. Admiral Petrov reports all stations are ready for extended engagement, and the Luna installations armed and prepared, sir." "But Admiral..." Commander Nakamura hesitated. "The crews are asking questions about what we're really fighting for." Thorn nodded grimly. That was the insidious genius of Chorus' campaign. He wasn't just offering military victory, he was offering evolution. Beyond the limitations of human flesh, minds expanded beyond individual consciousness. Perfect coordination without the messy inefficiencies of democratic decision-making. To a species that had been fighting a losing war for decades, it was a tempting proposition, sir. "Contact bearing 007 Mark 12, announced the sensor operator. "It's God in heaven, it's massive." The main display shifted to show the approaching fleet, and Thorn felt his breath catch in his throat. The human vessels were terrifying enough, their organic modifications making them look like mechanical predators given life. But the confluence ships were something else entirely, vast organisms that moved through space like living things, their transparent bodies revealing organs that pulsed with alien purpose. "How many?" Thorn asked quietly. 317 converted human vessels," the tactical coordinator reported. "And, sir, I'm reading 40 to confluence bioships, each one massing at least 10 times our largest dreadnought." Alarms began screaming throughout the command center as the fleet adjusted course directly for Earth. Thorn watched the projected intercept calculations with professional detachment, noting that they had perhaps 6 hours before the shooting started. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Thorn," he announced on the fleet-wide channel. "Prepare for general engagement. This is our final stand, people. Everything we've worked for, everything we've fought to protect, comes down to the next few hours." The response was immediate, 400 voices acknowledging orders, reporting readiness, confirming weapons status, whatever doubts they might have had about the war, about their chances of survival. The men and women of the colonial fleet were still human enough to stand and fight. As the enemy fleet closed to weapons range, Thorn studied the tactical display. One final time, the confluence had positioned their bioships in the center of the formation, protected by rings of converted human vessels. It was a sound tactical arrangement, but it also revealed something important. The aliens valued their own ships more than their human converts. That knowledge might be the key to victory, if victory was even possible. "All ships, weapons free," Thorn ordered. "Engage at maximum range." The Battle of Seoul began with a thunderclap of directed energy that lit up the inner system. Like a miniature star, 400 human vessels opened fire simultaneously. Their combined firepower focused on the outer ring of Chorus' fleet. For a moment, Thorn dared to hope as several converted ships staggered under the barrage, their organic hulls charring and cracking. Then the return fire began. The converted vessels' adaptive weapons proved even more devastating in mass combat, their bioenergy beams cutting through human shields like they weren't there. But worse were the confluence bioships, which launched swarms of smaller organisms that moved through space, like clouds of living projectiles. "Sir, the Wellington is reporting contact with unknown organisms," Commander Nakamura announced. They're eating through the hull." Thorn watched in horror as the proud battlecruiser began to dissolve from the outside in, her armor plating consumed by creatures no larger than a human fist. The ship's death screams echoed across the communications channels as her crew realized that conventional countermeasures were useless against an enemy that treated their vessels as food. "All ships, emergency protocol 77 Alpha," Thorn ordered. "Vent atmosphere and flood all compartments with hard radiation." It was a desperate measure that would kill any unprotected crew members, but it might stop the consuming organisms. Across the fleet, ship after ship began venting air and flooding their own hulls with lethal radiation levels. Choosing slow death over conversion, the tactic worked partially. The consuming organisms died in the radioactive environment, but The cost was horrific. Thousands of human crew members perished from radiation exposure. Their sacrifice buying precious minutes for their ships to continue fighting. Sir, Admiral Petrov is requesting permission to engage with the Mars defense grid. Commander Nakamura reported. Granted, all orbital platforms are authorized to fire at will. The massive weapon satellites around Mars opened fire in perfect coordination, their focused energy beams lancing across millions of kilometers to strike the approaching Confluence bioships for the first time in the battle. The aliens showed signs of real damage. One of the jellyfish-like creatures convulsed as its transparent body was seared by concentrated radiation, but their response was swift and terrible. The wounded bioship released a cloud of spores that spread through the vacuum like a living nebula. When the cloud reached the Mars orbital platforms, the weapon satellites simply stopped. Their targeting systems went dark, their weapons powered down, and their crew compartments filled with an alien presence that rewrote human consciousness in real time. Mars defense grid is compromised, Nakamura announced unnecessarily. Everyone in the command center could see the tactical display as friendly blue icons shifted to hostile red, the converted platforms turning their weapons on the approaching human fleet. Thorn watched his carefully planned defense crumble. With each passing minute, the enemy wasn't just defeating his forces, they were absorbing them, turning every loss into a victory for the Confluence. It was a mathematical progression that could only end one way. Sir, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Korath. Put it through. Korath's image appeared on the main screen, but his transformation had reached its final stage. His human features were now barely recognizable beneath layers of organic enhancement, and his eyes held the collective intelligence of the Confluence itself. Marcus, Korath said, his voice a harmony of human and alien tones. You fought admirably. Your species has exceeded our expectations for primitive resistance. But this ends now. Surrender, and your people will be offered the same transcendence that awaits all worthy civilizations. Go to hell, Lysander, Thorn replied. Korath's alien features shifted into something that might have been amusement. Hell, an interesting concept. We have encountered thousands of species, Marcus. Most choose evolution when faced with extinction. A few choose defiance. Both paths lead to the same destination, absorption into the Confluence. Then you don't know humans very well. On the contrary, Korath gestured to the tactical display showing the ongoing battle. We know you perfectly. You fight bravely. You die heroically, and you accomplish nothing. Your resistance is magnificent and ultimately futile. The transmission ended, leaving Thorn staring at a tactical situation that had become hopeless. Half his fleet was gone, converted or destroyed. The Mars platforms were now firing on his own ships, and the Confluence bioships were closing on Earth itself, their intention clear. Sir, Commander Nakamura said quietly, what are your orders? Thorn looked around the command center, seeing the faces of men and women who had served with honor for decades. They were asking him to give them a reason to continue fighting, to find some tactical miracle that would turn certain defeat into victory. He had none to offer. All ships, he announced on the fleet-wide channel, this is Admiral Thorn. We are facing an enemy that cannot be defeated by conventional means. They will convert our ships, our crews, our entire civilization into something unrecognizable. But we have one advantage they cannot take from us. We can choose how this ends. He paused, looking at the tactical display one final time. I'm authorizing Prometheus Protocol. Every ship, every station, every defensive platform is hereby ordered to initiate total destruction rather than allow capture. We may not be able to save humanity, but we can ensure it dies human. The silence that followed was broken by a single voice from the heavy cruiser Indomitable. Understood, Admiral. It's been an honor serving with you all. Similar acknowledgments echoed across the fleet as hundreds of ship commanders prepared for humanity's final act of defiance. But even as they reached for their self-destruct controls, new contacts appeared on the edge of the solar system. Sir, the sensor operator announced with barely contained excitement. We're detecting massive energy signatures from the outer system. Unknown configuration, but they're firing on the Confluence fleet. Thorn stared at the tactical display as the impossible happened. Whoever these newcomers were, they were engaging the bioships with weapons that actually caused damage, carving through alien flesh with focus beams of exotic energy. Who are they? He whispered. The answer came in the form of a transmission on an emergency frequency. broadcast in perfect human English with an accent that spoke of Earth's distant past. "This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Exodus Fleet. We apologize for the delay. It took us longer than expected to return home. All Colonial Fleet vessels, maintain your positions. We'll handle the aliens." As the mysterious fleet closed on the Confluence forces, Thorne realized that humanity's darkest hour was about to become something else entirely. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen had not expected to come home to war. The Terran Exodus Fleet had left Earth's solar system 73 years earlier. 10,000 ships carrying humanity's most brilliant scientists, engineers, and visionaries on a one-way journey to the galactic rim. They had departed not in defeat, but in defiance, convinced that Earth's leaders were too short-sighted to prepare for the true threats lurking in deep space. Now, as her flagship Prometheus Unbound led 800 vessels of unknown design toward the soul battle space, Chen reflected on the bitter irony of their return. They had spent 7 decades building a civilization capable of surviving any threat the galaxy could offer. They had never imagined the threat would be wearing human faces. "Admiral, we're in weapons range of the bioships," reported Captain Dmitry Volkov from the tactical station. His accent carried the same Earth origins as Chen's, but his eyes held depths that spoke of decades among alien stars. "All ships, execute Burning Sky Protocol," Chen ordered. "Target the Confluence vessels exclusively. Do not fire on converted human ships unless they pose an immediate threat." The Exodus Fleet's weapons were unlike anything in the Colonial Fleet's arsenal. 70 years of desperate innovation, guided by knowledge gleaned from a dozen extinct civilizations, had produced artillery that bent space-time itself. As the first salvo struck the nearest Confluence bioship, the creature's transparent flesh simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by weapons that denied the possibility of its existence. On Earth, Admiral Thorne watched in stunned amazement as the alien fleet began to disintegrate under sustained fire from weapons that defied physics. As he understood it, the massive jellyfish-like creatures convulsed and died, their internal galaxies of light guttering out like extinguished stars. "Sir," Commander Nakamura announced, her voice filled with wonder. "The Confluence fleet is retreating. They're actually running." But even as the bioships withdrew, the converted human vessels continued their advance on Earth. Admiral Korath's voice cut across all communication channels, his tone carrying alien harmonics that made the words hurt to hear. "Fascinating," he mused. "The children return home with toys we don't recognize, but you cannot save them, Chen. The conversion is irreversible. These humans are ours now." Sarah Chen's image appeared on the Colonial Fleet's communication channels, and Thorne felt his breath catch. She looked human, but there was something about her eyes, her movements, that spoke of experiences beyond normal human comprehension. Her uniform bore no recognizable insignia, and her ship's bridge showed technology that seemed to shift and flow like living things. "Lysander Korath," Chen said, her voice carrying absolute authority, "I remember you from the Academy. You were always brilliant, always convinced that the ends justified any means. I see you found alien friends who share your philosophy." Sarah Korath's transformed features showed something that might have been genuine pleasure. "I wondered if any of the Exodus survivors would return. Tell me, what did you find out there in the deep dark? What convinced you to abandon humanity's cradle?" "We found the truth," Chen replied. "We found the civilizations that came before us, the ones that made the same choice you're making now. We found their ruins, their warnings, their corpses. Evolution through absorption isn't transcendence, Lysander. It's extinction with extra steps." The tactical display showed the converted human fleet closing on Earth's orbital platforms, but instead of opening fire, they simply stopped. For several minutes, an eerie silence filled the communications channels. "You're wrong," Korath finally said. "The Confluence offers true unity, an end to the isolation and conflict that defines human existence. Individual consciousness is a burden. Sarah, let us show you the peace that comes with collective awareness." "I've seen your peace," Chen replied. "I've seen what happens to species that accept the Confluence's gift. They become components in a machine, their uniqueness dissolved into a homogeneous collective. That's not evolution, it's surrender." As if responding to her words, the Exodus fleet began broadcasting on frequencies that made reality itself seem to shimmer. The converted human ships found their organic modifications beginning to spasm and fail as exotic energies disrupted the alien biotechnology that bound them to the Confluence. "What are you doing?" Korath demanded, his voice rising with something approaching panic. Giving their crews a choice, Chen replied, "The same choice every human deserves to remain themselves." Across Korath's fleet, converted crew members began collapsing as the alien symbiotes that had rewritten their DNA started to die. Some screamed as their enhanced capabilities failed, their expanded consciousness contracting back to merely human limitations. Others wept with relief as they remembered who they had been before the conversion, but not all of them wanted to return. On the bridge of the Valiant Ember, Admiral Korath felt the collective consciousness of the confluence fragmenting as the Exodus fleet's weapons disrupted the quantum entanglement that linked all converted beings. For 7 years, he had existed as part of something greater than individual human awareness. The prospect of returning to the isolation of a single mind filled him with existential terror. "No," he whispered, his voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's organic systems pulse with distress. "I won't go back. I won't be alone again." The Valiant Ember broke from the fleet formation, accelerating toward Earth with desperate speed. Its organic weapons began charging for a final strike, not at the military targets that would make tactical sense, but at the civilian population centers that would cause maximum psychological damage. "All ships, intercept the Ember," Admiral Thorne ordered. "She's targeting the planetary surface." But the converted flagship was faster than anything in the colonial fleet, its alien modifications allowing it to achieve accelerations that would have killed a human crew. It plunged through Earth's defensive formations like a living spear, its weapons already locking onto major population centers. Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with calculating eyes. The Prometheus Unbound could intercept Korath's ship, but not without exposing her own vessel to devastating counterattack. Her crew, humans who had spent decades among alien stars and survived experiences that would have broken weaker minds, waited for her decision. "All power to engines," she ordered. "Ramming speed, Admiral. The collision will," Captain Volkov began. "I know," Chen interrupted, "but some things are worth dying human for." The Prometheus Unbound accelerated on an intercept course that would bring it into direct collision with the Valiant Ember. At the last moment, Chen opened a communication channel to Korath's ship. "You were wrong about one thing, Lysander," she said quietly. "Individual consciousness isn't a burden. It's what makes us human, and being human is worth preserving, even if it kills us." The two ships struck each other at a significant fraction of light speed, their collision visible from Earth's surface as a brief new star. When the light faded, both vessels were gone, taking with them the last of the confluence's converted human leadership. Without Korath's guidance, the remaining converted ships found themselves cut off from the collective consciousness that had defined their existence for years. Some continued fighting out of habit, but most simply drifted in space, their crews struggling to remember how to function as individuals. The battle of soul was over, but the war for humanity's soul was just beginning. 6 months after the battle of soul, Captain Vex Rourke, somehow still alive despite his apparent death at Kepler's gate, stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt Earth orbital station, watching recovery teams work among the debris fields that had once been the colonial fleet's proudest vessels. His survival had been a miracle of emergency protocols and stubborn human engineering. His command pod ejected moments before his ship's destruction and picked up by one of the few vessels that had escaped the battle. The galaxy was a very different place now. The confluence had retreated to whatever dark corner of space they called home, but their influence lingered across human space. Former colonies struggled with populations that remembered transcendence and found ordinary human existence lacking by comparison. Some chose to rebuild their societies along familiar lines. Others attempted to recreate the collective consciousness they had lost, leading to civil wars and social fragmentations that made the original hegemony conflict look like a minor border dispute. "Captain," the voice belonged to Admiral Helena Voss, who had also somehow survived the destruction of her flagship, pulled from the wreckage by the same rescue teams that had found Rourke. Her hair was now completely white, and her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences no human should have to endure. "Admiral," Rourke acknowledged, not turning from the observation window. "The preliminary reports are in," Voss continued. 17 colonies have declared independence from Earth's government. 23 others are requesting military intervention to deal with conversion cults that have sprung up among their populations. And the Exodus fleet, she paused. They've established their own territorial claims in the Outer Rim, with Sarah Chen's successor declaring that Earth's government lacks the competence To lead humanity's expansion into the galaxy, Rourke finally turned to face her. So we won. Voss was quiet for a long moment. Did we? Half our fleet is gone. A quarter of our colonies are in revolt. The hegemony is still out there, rebuilding their forces while we tear ourselves apart from within. And somewhere in deep space, the Confluence is probably planning their next attempt at uplifting another species. But we're still human, Rourke pointed out. Whatever else has happened, whatever we've lost, we're still ourselves. We make our own choices, feel our own emotions, dream our own dreams. That has to count for something. Through the observation window, they could see the construction crews working on the new ship's vessels. That incorporated lessons learned from the war, but remained recognizably human in design and purpose. No organic modifications, no collective consciousness interfaces, no shortcuts to transcendence that came at the cost of individual identity. There's something else. Voss said quietly. Intelligence reports suggest that the Confluence wasn't working alone. They were part of something larger, a network of species that spread throughout the galaxy offering the same gift to any civilization advanced enough to be worth absorbing. Earth was just one target among thousands. Rourke considered this. How many species have accepted their offer? Most of them, Voss admitted. The ones that refused. She gestured toward the debris fields outside. Well, we can see how that usually ends. But we survived. Humanity survived. Some of us did. The question is whether that's enough. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the work crews laboring to rebuild from the wreckage of their civilization. The task seemed impossible. Humanity was fractured, traumatized, facing enemies that could reshape reality itself. But they were still human, still capable of choice, still able to dream of futures that existed beyond mere survival. In the depths of space, monitoring stations detected new signals from the galactic core, transmissions that suggested the Confluence was already moving against other species, offering the same transcendence that had nearly destroyed humanity. But mixed with those alien communications were responses in familiar frequencies, messages that carried the harmonic signatures of Earth's languages. Admiral Korath's voice, distorted by cosmic radiation but still recognizably human, echoed across the void. This is Admiral Lysander Korath of the Terran Resistance Fleet. Any human vessels receiving this transmission, be advised that the war is not over. The Confluence has enslaved dozens of species, but their control is not absolute. Those of us who retained our humanity are organizing, building a fleet that answers to no one but the memory of what we once were. The transmission continued with coordinates, tactical intelligence, and a simple message that made both Rourke and Voss smile despite themselves. We are still human. We are still fighting. And we are coming home. Humanity has survived its first encounter with transcendence, not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender what made them unique. They had chosen to remain themselves, with all the limitations and contradictions that entailed. It was, perhaps, the most human decision they could have made. In the years that followed, historians would debate whether the Battle of Seoul represented humanity's greatest victory or its most pyrrhic defeat. But for those who lived through it, the answer was simpler. They had faced a choice between evolution and extinction, between transcendence and humanity. They had chosen to remain human. And in a galaxy full of species that had made different choices, that decision would prove to be their greatest strength. The war was not over. The Confluence would return, bringing with them new offers of transcendence and new threats of absorption. But humanity would be ready, armed with the knowledge that some things were worth preserving even at the cost of everything else. They were still human, they were still free, and they would not surrender either gift without a fight that would be remembered across the stars.